Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you guys are all staying safe and healthy. My name is Sally Liu. I am the class of 2021, so I'm a first year here at Yale SOM. I will be moderating today, and we have four really amazing women here on the panel today, and I'll just let each of them introduce themselves. So give us your name, your background, your year, and we can start with Maya.
Sure. So my name is Maya. My background, I started in marketing before moving to corporate social responsibility. I'm originally from DC before coming to SOM. And what else am I supposed to be saying? That was it?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, great.
All right, Snigdha.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Snigdha Rao. I'm a first-year MBA. I originally came to SOM after doing strategy consulting for 4.5 years in DC, originally from Maryland. And this summer, I'm going to be working for the federal government at the National Park Service. It's great to meet you all virtually.
Okay, Lindsay, do you want to go?
Hi everyone, I'm Lindsay Bader. I'm a first year here at SOM. Before school, I mostly worked in the policy and political space. I came to business school to pivot my career and I'm going into investment banking this summer. I'll be summaring at Morgan Stanley. Nice to meet you all.
I'll go. Thank you, Sally. Hi, everyone. I'm Farhana, second-year MBA student here. I'm originally from New York. Before coming to SOM, I used to be a research assistant at the Federal Reserve, which is probably a very interesting place to work at right now, just given what's happening in the markets. I'll be going into management consulting after I graduate, and during the summer I worked at tech, so happy to talk about that as well.
Great, awesome. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists one question today, and then we're going to open the floor up to Q&A. So if you have any questions, please start sending them into the chat feature, and we will start answering them after the first one. And please try to keep your questions general. If you have any specific questions, feel free to follow up with admissions after the webinar is over. So the first question we have on the panel for all the panelists is, why Yale? So Maya, do you want to start?
I'll start. So I chose SOM for a variety of reasons, coming from the corporate social responsibility space within a large company, Fortune 100 company. For me, it was really integral to understand how normal business decisions impact society. And I feel like a lot of the MBA programs I went to visit, anytime I told them I had an interest in decisions that impact the community or social impact, they will always like steer me towards this nonprofit track or like the Net Impact Club, not really understanding what I wanted. And I feel like SOM was one of the few programs that really got that there is this very core intersection between business and community impact. So I think that was the main reason. And then, of course, when I came to Welcome Weekend, it just felt like such a great fit. I had a good time. I met some of my best friends at Welcome Weekend. So it just instantly felt like home.
I can go if we're keeping the same order. So I think for me, it really came down to, similar to Maya, just the community and people. I think every conversation I had with an SOM student, an alumni or a current student, they all had a very common interest in kind of using their business education to create a positive impact in the world. And there was this common thread that I noticed in every conversation that I had that I know I really connected with. And then I think coming to Welcome Weekend, coming to campus to visit, it just further like solidified my interest. And I think going with my gut in this case was a really good decision. And yeah, so the people here are just absolutely wonderful.
Okay, I guess I'm up. Okay, so why did I decide on Yale? I liked how the School of Management has a small community. I predicted that it would allow for just stronger bonds, and I think looking back on the past year or so, that's definitely true. I knew I wanted to go into investment banking, so I liked the proximity to New York. I think that did enable a really fruitful recruiting process for me. And coming from a non-business or finance background, but going into a field in that space, I really wanted a strong academic program where I could learn and get exposure to material I didn't really have coming from political science major in college. And all that led me to deciding on Yale. Absolutely love it here. If you're thinking of some of the same things I was thinking about, then I would say it's a good place to be. There's a really strong community. Recruiting, I think, is really great, especially if you want to be in the New York area. And the classes are very intriguing.
Similar to Snigdha and Lindsay, I'll say that culture was definitely very important to me. I felt like a lot of the MBA programs out there, they'll for the most part give you what you're kind of looking for. But what really stood out was the people that I met during super interview day, where I felt like I easily connected with them, was very, very impressed by their backgrounds, and just really saw myself being here as a full-time student. Also, so I knew I wanted to be back in New York City, so the proximity to New York City was also a huge plus for me. And finally, I'll say, like, as a non-traditional background, I really valued a very strong curriculum. So I wanted to learn about accounting. I wanted to learn about strategy and finance. And I felt like, given the impressive faculty members here, that was definitely a plus for me, and ultimately why I chose SOM.
Okay, great. Thank you all so much. So we'll open the floor to questions. And we have a lot of questions coming in, which is great. So let's see. Can you guys talk about what student clubs you all are involved in, and what has been the most memorable experience that you have had at SOM? Anyone can start.
Yeah, I can go really quickly. So I'm part of the admissions committee here at Women in Management, and I'll say that even when I was going through the whole process, the mentorship program that the admissions committee puts on every year, where we connect current first or second year students with new prospective students who are invited to interview, was definitely a huge plus in my experience, because I really got to know a student on a more closer level, and she kind of like coached me and kind of made me feel comfortable about the whole idea of going to an MBA and what to expect, and was really able to have a genuine conversation. And so that was a pleasant experience, and was definitely something I was very involved in here as a first year and a second year, and definitely something that like I really enjoyed and actively push for and hope is going to continue in the years to come. So that was a huge plus for me.
So I'm involved in a lot on campus. I'm also in student government as an admissions co-chair with SNCDA. Hey! Some of the other clubs I hold leadership roles are Black Business Alliance as a VP, consortium liaison, a VP of Black Graduate Network. Those are like the ones that I hold leadership roles in. And I think my favorite experience with any of those is planning Harvard Yale. So the Harvard Yale kind of rotates every other year, and this past year was at Yale. So being on the executive team for Black Graduate Network, I had the privilege of planning all of the parties around Harvard Yale, and that just was an amazing experience. I think because so many other schools, not like excluding Harvard, will come just to be in the area to experience it. And so getting to network and just kick it with a lot of other people from peer schools who I don't get to see on a regular basis was a great time.
Yeah, I remember Harvard Yale. It was really fun. So thank you for planning all of that. All right, we'll move on to our next question. As a woman, do you feel your voice is heard?
I don't know why there's so much hesitation on this question. Yes. Yes. I mean,
No, absolutely a yes. It's just hard to be like, well, yes. Why wouldn't there be?
yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like maybe that's what the pause was about. I feel like there should be
Yeah.
a deeper question, but it really isn't. I feel like my voice is plenty heard at SOM.
Yeah, I think, and I saw a question similar to this about being a woman in recruiting, and maybe people wonder about being a woman in a classroom. I think what's nice is that we have the women's network, WIM, which represents, women broadly, but then I think whatever path you take at SOM, the network within that path is going to be strong as well. So of course I recruited for investment banking, but we had a core of women that went on that journey, and we all supported each other tremendously throughout that process. So I just think no matter what you choose to do while you're here, your voice is going to be heard, whether in the classroom or whether in student government, as some people have alluded to, or through recruiting. Just the bonds between the women here are very strong, no matter what you do.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. I think if you're asking specifically about the classroom environment, I have always felt like my voice is heard. I think professors have done a really good job of, not choosing certain people more often than others. They do a really great job of kind of spreading out the voices in the room. And I think something good that's happened when we kind of have classes on Zoom is some of the shyer people or quieter people participate more. So I think there's a lot of very equal kind of input provided by everyone. So I have always felt my voice is heard here.
One thing I can add as well is that, part of the core, you take this one class called Stay in Society. And one of my favorite classes taught in that course was, why are women being underpaid than men? And you learn a lot about the research that's in that topic. You learn a lot about why women sort of like keep themselves back. And I felt like, I'm so happy that that class was even taught, because it really brings up that discussion among people who will be leaders for business and society. So yes, women are definitely heard here.
Yeah, I'm taking that class now, and there's definitely a lot of conversation and discussion in that class, which I love. So speaking of the core, can anyone talk a little bit more about the core curriculum?
Yeah, sure. I mean, at a high level, you're going to get your basics of business, everything from accounting to economics, but it's everything that you'd want to feel comfortable going into a business role. I don't know if people want to hit on that more, but I mean, I think Yale does a good job of covering. I don't feel I'm lacking. I don't think there's any class that we don't have that I would need to compete with other students this summer or after school.
Yeah, and I think the core is really nice because you take it with your cohort. So you're kind of placed into these, when you come to SOM, you're placed into a group of 70-ish other people that you're kind of stuck with throughout the year. And so you end up taking classes with them all year, and you get to know them really well. And each cohort has kind of a different dynamic. So I think the core curriculum is helpful in the academic sense, but it's also helpful in the social sense, because you're kind of able to bond with a smaller group within SOM as well.
All right, so I know right now would not be a typical day at SOM, but can one of you describe what would have been a typical day at SOM if under normal circumstances?
That's really hard. I think we all have such diverse experiences. I don't know that there's one typical day. I know in the fall, it was a lot of stress, at least for a lot of my friends, just like getting through the quant heavy stuff. But I mean, even then it's different, because there are a lot of people that are way more comfortable with the quant material, and so they weren't as stressed in the fall. Yeah, I don't know that I can actually think of what a typical day for everybody would look like.
I mean, you go to class, of course. And then honestly, I think pretty much every day, if you want, you could go to some social event at the business school. This question is making me feel very nostalgic for days past, to be honest. We, of course, have not entered Evans Hall, which is where the business school exists, in weeks now. But there's always something, whether it's a cultural event or Every Thursday after class, we have something called Closing Bell, where the entire community comes together and celebrates the week past. And it's always hosted by one of the student clubs, whether it's a cultural club or more of a career-focused club, and that's nice. There are hockey games every Wednesday for most of the year where either you play or your classmates play, and you can go participate either watching or playing. There's a lot of learning opportunity. I went to a talk at the Yale School last semester. There's just so much to do. But then it's also, you live in New Haven. It's a small community. I'm a member of the gym that's not affiliated with Yale in my community, and I go there pretty regularly. So there's a nice balance, I think, of doing stuff with the business school, obviously going to your classes, doing your homework, going to events that the business school or Yale sponsors, or doing something on your own, because we live in this wonderful residential space. But yeah, it's definitely varies, like Maya said, but I think there's like always something to do if you want that.
Yeah, sometimes it's like drinking from a hose because there are so many things happening at the same time. And the biggest struggle for me here has been just figuring out what I want to do because I want to do everything. One great thing about this virtual Zoom learning experience is a lot of the talks that I wouldn't be able to make time for can now just watch it after it's been recorded and things like that.
So how are you all dealing with COVID-19 then?
I mean, it's definitely an adjustment. I think for all of us. I know the second years are probably having a different experience than some of our first years are. But I mean, it's tough. Like no one really knows what's going on or what's going to happen. But I think everyone in the SOM community has done a really good job, like rolling with the punches. Professors, administration, students. I think so the professors actually ended up working through spring break just to get all of our classes online. And they found ways to make it engaging by using breakout rooms and things like that. So it's definitely been an adjustment, but there's some good things that come out of it as well. So I know I mentioned that I've noticed a lot more participation from some of my quieter peers, which I think is really cool. And then we're still able to have discussions over Zoom. And, we use Zoom a lot more, but other than that, there's just always cool events going on. Like the Design and Innovation Club hosts these tiny desk concerts on Instagram, and they're amazing. And there's just so many social events that are still being put on. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but if you guys know of any others, there's just a lot of cool stuff happening.
Yeah, I think a lot of the student events, like the internship auction or internship fund auction, is still going on, and we're just doing it all over Zoom, and it's trying to make the best out of the current situation, which is nice. So for those coming from a non-traditional background, can you discuss the resources to help you succeed at SOM?
Yeah, I can go first. So when I first came in, I wanted to go into tech, and so I worked at IBM this past summer, and we have a technology club here, and I would say the biggest resource, they were my biggest resource in recruiting for tech, just because they have a question bank, right, where you can go through some of the questions that were asked in past interviews and really practice and kind of understand the own casing method that a lot of tech companies use during interviews. So that was very, very beneficial. The tech club would also host lunch meetings with people who work in the tech industry. And these could be very senior level people, like the CMO of Spotify came by and gave a talk. It could also be people who work at the more associate level and talk about what they've done, as well as panels up with current second year students who would discuss their summer internship experience. So that was a big thing. And then along, with that, it was also, when I decided to go into consulting instead, after I graduate, the consulting club was also a big thing. So the clubs here are very, very useful when it comes to recruiting. And then I'll say, in addition to that, having the basics of, what it takes to work in business, like learning those basic concepts, the core curriculum played a big role.
Yeah, I would definitely agree on the clubs. It kind of it talks to the community at SOM. I know, and one of the other questions were like, SOM has this really strong brand in philanthropy and nonprofit. How do employers view you as a candidate when you recruit for things like finance um, and consulting? And honestly, I felt really well prepared. The clubs, the CDO, that again, that network, because SOM is a smaller community, I feel like I have a lot better access to even my peers and alum who are willing to kind of help me in making sure that I'm prepared for the interview process so that I can be successful. And I think employers understand this too. To be honest, there's far more people at SOM that go into finance and consulting than nonprofit. I think that might be Yale's brand, but the reality is like employers are coming to SOM just as much to get those consultants and financiers. So I don't think that's anything to worry about.
So kind of going on the topic of, your careers post MBA, do you mind sharing your career plan before going into SOM and how your education at SOM has either changed your career goal or help you get towards your original goal?
Sure. So I came into the program knowing I was interested in investment banking and did end up pursuing that. I was a little hesitant, or I was a little skeptical about my ability to even secure that internship, given that I had such a different background doing policy work and really having no finance or business experience. But the banking process, the recruiting process starts so early that if you really commit to it, you can be successful no matter what your background. And I think that's really nice and telling, that if you want to make a big pivot like I did, you can definitely do it at Yale. And I know there are probably other people on the panel who had a little bit of a different recruiting process, but for me, I know I came in knowing what I wanted to do, was not totally sure if it was feasible, but it ended up being very feasible. I got multiple offers, and I'm happy with the result.
Okay. Or Maya, do you want to share?
I'm trying to think. I came in thinking I was going to go back into corporate social responsibility. I was trying to figure out the best way to phrase this, which is why I was hesitant. I think I'm now going into consulting. I think honestly what SOM did was provide exposure in a way that I hadn't had access to before. I'm just being completely honest, like being raised by a single mama, growing up in Northeast DC, in my head that if I could make six figures, I was like living the life and I was rich. And so I had this very strong vision for going back into CSR, realizing what that pay was. And then when I got to B school and I heard about things like consulting and banking, like ideas that I didn't even know about before and what their associated salaries were, I made a pivot. And I might still go back to CSR, I might still go back to social impact, but having that exposure made me realize that I wanted to try something different. And to be honest, I have the background to go back to CSR anytime. And I really felt like someone coming from that space, it was going to be a lot more difficult for me to try to get into consulting later on if I didn't sort of jump on the opportunity now. So that's why I chose to pivot now, just getting that exposure to all sorts of career fields that I didn't know. Like I didn't even know consulting was a thing, to be honest. What's a consulting?
So Yale actually has faculty members that are exceptional in organizational behavior. And there's a professor who I also really, really love called Amy Rezanowski, and she has a sort of like a workshop every year towards the end of the year about job design. So how can you find a job that fits you, will make you happy, and you kind of know how to like work in it. And I thought that was very, very helpful for me because it helped me realize what am I looking for and what do I need to do in order to get that job that I need.
I want to know more about that workshop because I would love to take that.
Yeah,
but I was just going to add I was just going to add to, what has been said. So I think I have had kind of an opposite reaction. So I came from consulting, and I knew that I wanted to get more exposure to the policy space and to the nonprofit and social sector space, coming to SOM. And so I think that obviously influenced the way that I recruited in the fall. I didn't really recruit in the fall. It was more just like talking to second years, talking to alumni, trying to figure out like what the nonprofit recruiting timeline even looks like. And I think something that I've learned in school that I feel like is really important, and I wish someone had kind of told me more, was that your job right after business school is not going to be your job for life. And I think it's really important that something that I've learned in my last year is like, okay, what's my long-term plan? Like whatever job I'm going to do after business school is just a stepping stone to like the job that I really want, that I'm going to be super happy in, like Farhana said, or like that is really meaningful to me. So I think if you kind of think about it in terms of like, all right, this is just another step on my path, I think that takes a lot of pressure off to find like this perfect job after you graduate from business school. And it's really helped me like put my priorities in check. So.
I think what's so great about the MBA is that there's so many different people with so many different experiences, and you learn a lot from those people as you go through the process. So can you guys talk about a little bit more about what the diversity at SOM is like?
So I think that there are a lot of elements of diversity at SOM, and some of them we do really, really well. Like the fact that we have, honestly, almost half of the student body are international students, and we're getting very, very close to parity in terms of women and men. And to everyone's point before, like we all come from such diverse backgrounds. I don't think SOM recruits any one type of person. And so I think that's been amazing, and it's added a lot of value in the classroom conversations. I think one thing we're still looking to improve on is like U.S. underrepresented minorities. That number has remained a little flat over the past years, and one of the things that I've liked about my time at SOM is like when I talk to administration about what are the challenges, how we can improve, I'm wanting to take things on to make a difference. They've been super open and like letting me do things and giving me the resources to really run with it. Even right now, I've been working on a nearly year-long independent study with our deans and admissions and community inclusion on how to really strategically come up with some ideas that will change those demographics in the future. So just one way of how like we're really great at some areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion. There are definitely opportunities to improve, but the thing that's different about SOM is like they're willing to admit this and then give students the resources to take the lead on some things.
I just wanted to add to that too. Like I think something that really surprised me is how willing and open everyone is to talk about things, and especially in terms of diversity and inclusion is, there's improvement areas. Everyone has improvement areas, but I think we are really good about just being like, okay, this needs to be fixed now. And there's people like Maya who take that on as an independent study and work with like administration to do that. So I think it's really nice to be able to talk about it so freely, and it's something that all of us really, really care about in the classroom and outside of it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all that you guys have said about diversity. So kind of along the same lines, are there any particular challenges you faced as a woman of color in business, and how have you overcome those challenges?
I don't know. I'm sure there are probably some challenges that have gone, I shouldn't say challenges, not really the right word, but some things that have gone unnoticed. But I think that one of the, at least personally for me, one of the challenges has honestly been convincing others that it's okay to lead authentically. I think for so much of our lives, we've been conditioned to code switch, act a certain way, put on a certain norm when we're in the interview space, that it can be different when you come into an environment like SOM that is so open and like it's a safe space. You can really be yourself, I promise. So I think that's been honestly one of the challenges. It's just like getting others to believe that it is really okay to be authentic, especially in terms of like recruiting and stuff, like where the stakes are a little higher. I think some of the ways that we've overcome this is by setting a positive example in the classroom and like being willing to have those brave conversations in the classroom, and then making sure that students of color have a voice and a presence in leadership roles on campus. And I think that's also helped.
The thing what Maya brought up about being authentic kind of remind me of is that, you know, when you're recruiting for consulting, after your first round and you get passed on to the second round, they'll give you some feedback on how well you did. And my biggest positive feedback was that I was always authentic and that I didn't. There's a lot of people who kind of just go into the interview room and kind of just sit there and don't smile and don't really show who they really are and how they think. And I think that's what employers want to see. That's what your classmates want to see. And so, you know, being yourself would be, you know, highly recommended.
Yeah, see, I think that authenticity really contributes to the great community that we have here. And speaking of community, there's a strong pay it forward culture at SOM, and the relationship between the second and first year is paramount. Can you describe an anecdotal experience you had with this?
I
Yeah,
can.
I think.
Okay, I'll go and then I'll pass. Yeah, so with investment banking, I had a mentor. So that was one of the reasons why I was like, when I was sold on SOM was when I met the second years at my welcome weekend who represented the investment banking club, or we call it the finance club. And it was so obvious to me that because the school is smaller, the second years were so much more involved in the process. And the mentorship part of it was huge. And my mentor guided me through the entire recruiting process. I'm really close with a lot of second years just because I did investment banking. I'm sure people have other experiences. It doesn't just have to be recruiting, but for me, that was such a big part of my first semester. And it was just amazing how the second years really, really wanted the first years to do well in recruiting, gave us all advice, talked about the banking, everything about banking, what it was like. And yeah, it was super cool. And it's super awesome now to say that I know second years really well because of that experience.
Yeah, I second that. I had a second year who helped me get my internship essentially as well. He had done the same internship I'm going into this summer. And he basically sat down with me like every other week, just telling me how to prepare for my interviews and how to prepare for my cases and things like that, which was really helpful. And then what I want to add is there's, outside of recruiting, like Lindsay was saying, there's a lot of just, I know I spoke with second years a lot. I know Maya, I like called her like many times just being like, okay, how does this work? Like, how should I go about doing this? Just trying to figure out like the norms of the school and try to figure out my place kind of in the SOM community. And all of the second years are so open to that. There have been multiple times where I just email a random second year to asking to get coffee, and they're more than welcome, more than open to kind of chatting with me about that. So thank you both for being great second years.
Yeah, I always see people chatting the first years and the second years in Evans Cafe, which is our where you get your coffee at SOM. So yeah, really great bonds between the first and second years. So can some of you talk a little bit more about New Haven and what you like to do in the area?
Oh my God, eat pizza, easy. Definitely, as a New Yorker, I was very hesitant. I didn't know if pizza from New Haven was going to be good, but surprisingly it is. And I've tried like every single one of them at this point. So highly, highly recommend doing that. But besides that, there's also like cool little hiking trails you go to. So I live in East Rock, which is like a 5 or 10 minute walk away from That's what I'm building. And there's like a nice little gigantic rock that you can hike to. And there's a great little dog park if you guys have dogs and need a place to just like have them roam around and catch a tree branch or something. But yeah.
I really enjoy New Haven. So it's obviously not New York City or San Francisco or Boston. It's not a major city, but it's close to major cities. And for those of, I mean, most of us are probably going to intern in a big city or work there after or lived in one before. For me, it's a nice break. It's just being in an academic environment, having a little bit more of a residential feel for me. It just feels like I can focus more on the experience of being a student and building bonds with my classmates. And I think that's just so amazing. I mean, from a social standpoint, people have house parties, which is really cool. It's like very collegiate versus like going to an apartment in, I don't know, like whatever neighborhood in New York, which is also fun too. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just, this is what makes which makes Yale and New Haven very unique. Like right now that it's becoming warmer, especially with COVID, I go for bike rides a lot. I walk a lot. There are parks that you can go to. There's just like, it's so quaint and nice, and there's a strong community feel. And I really, really like that.
I like to drink and I like to dance. And I think New Haven is great for both of those. And especially if you're on a budget like I am, being so close to major cities means we get a lot of big acts. And it also means that we get them for a lot cheaper than if we were to see the same show in the major city. And I like hip hop and R&B. Those are my favorite genres. And so we have actually a lot of big performers come at, to Toads and perform, and you can get tickets anytime for $30. So that's been amazing to see some like big acts for $30. And Griffin's is the graduate bar, and be able to go there and drink for really cheap and then get a free Yale Uber basically back to your house is at 3 in. It's awesome. There are things like, there are some advantages to living in a smaller city. There are things you just wouldn't experience at the price point you get them at in New Haven.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I love seeing plays and theater, and there's actually like a lot to do in New Haven as well. Like the Yale Drama School has shows, the Yale Repertory Theater has shows. There's also the Schubert Theater downtown. So there's like a lot of, if you want to, and museums, we didn't talk about that. There's like so many museums in New Haven if you're, more artistically inclined as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up all these different things to do around not just SOM, but also Yale. So, they want to know how much interaction is there with the broader Yale community? Are classes just for SOM students, or do other Yale students participate?
You want to go, Maya?
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, I mean, one Yale is definitely very, very true here, where you could take classes in the with the undergrads. I think a lot of the times why MBA students decide not to do it is because it either conflicts with the schedule that you have, because you still have to take SOM courses sometimes, or it's just because you're like afraid of keeping up with the undergrads because they're so damn smart. So I guess, just to to conclude, it's, you can take those courses. There's nothing that stops you. You just, email the professor, give them a reason why you'd like to take it, and based on capacity and your willingness to work through it is ultimately it.
Yeah, I've taken a couple of classes at the other grad schools, and to Farhana's point, I started to take one undergrad class and then I dropped it because I'm like, this is too much work. They do so much reading. Oh my gosh.
Like a book a day.
Yeah. I thought raw cases were bad. They were like, read this whole book. I'm like, by when? Tomorrow. Okay. So I dropped that class. But I really enjoyed the classes that I've taken at the other grad schools. I think one of my favorites is when I took at the Divinity School. Actually a Yale alum from Divinity School, who then became the chief police of New Haven. which is very interesting. He teaches a class around how he uses community policing as a form of ministry, because you reach a audience of people that just wouldn't come into the church. And so how he made a very conscious decision to, even after graduating from the divinity school, not go into the pulpit, but to go into policing, and the dynamics behind that, especially with the tension between New Haven and, I don't know, it's just a really good class. Highly recommend it. But yeah, that's one of the classes I've enjoyed the most from one of the other grad schools at Yale. And somebody else asked this, there's no limit to how many classes you can take outside of SOM after you've taken all of your core classes. So after you've taken all your core classes for elective, honestly, if you want to take all your electives elsewhere, feel free. I don't know anyone who has, just because there is so much experience at SOM, but definitely up to you.
Yeah, I think one of the best experiences is the global study requirement, which obviously we didn't get to do the first years because of COVID-19, but maybe some of the second years. Can you talk about your experiences?
Yeah, so I went to South Africa, which was a ton of fun, and this was international experience. So this is a 2-week full sort of adventure, and each IE kind of has their own theme. And for South Africa, it was about how to deal with the end of apartheid and making sure that people are inclusive and participating in the economy. So we met with a lot of business leaders, we met with politicians, very, very interesting. And at the end of it, you kind of have some time to sort of explore South Africa outside of, with the professor. And so what my classmates and I did was go on a safari in Johannesburg, 3-day safari, which was like one of the best life experiences I've ever had.
Yeah, I took a little bit of a non-traditional route, I guess you can say, because I chose to study abroad, and which is definitely one of the benefits of going to school in the global network of advanced management. Because you can design your own sort of custom study abroad experience. I also went to South Africa, which is crazy. But for me, I wanted to go somewhere for a little bit longer than the 10 days that IE gives you. I wanted to be there long enough to really understand sort of like those intricate dynamics, especially in a place that is so torn from systematic oppression of a people. And so in that way, it has very much similarities to the States, which is why I chose to go there. So I just got back a few weeks ago, actually, and it was an amazing experience. We'll definitely go back again.
So we're getting a lot of questions about students who come to SOM with families. So I'm not sure if you are one or if you know of anyone, but could you speak to how common it is for students to come with families or as mothers, and what sort of support is available for them? And then if there's like any involvement from students, spouses, and partners.
I don't have a partner, but there are a lot of people that do. I think we can all speak to our friends and classmates that have partners and that have children. It's very common. I mean, it's kind of really nice because those that have babies often bring them to Evans Hall, so we can kind of relish in that. But it's super welcomed. And I know a lot of my classmates, partners, they engage in the social events. There are clubs for parents or partners or both. And I know that they're very active. But yeah, I mean, I think there's some partners that I'm closer with the partner than the actual student. So if that's telling to you at all, it's just how much these people have become integrated into the SOM community. I don't even, like at some point, you don't even really distinguish between who is the student anymore. They just are all, everyone's kind of one community.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think sometimes I get confused about whether it's the partner that's attending SOM or not. So can you talk a little bit about how you think Yale differs from other top B schools in terms of values, perhaps also in terms of specialization?
Yeah, so I think I kind of already shared mine, but I think the way that SOM thinks about that integration between business and society is very different. Again, I knew that I knew that I wanted to go into a space that has social impact, and again, it's kind of saying what I said earlier, but a lot of top business schools, as soon as they hear social impact, they try to steer you into this nonprofit track, or point you to their net impact club, and it seemed very limiting. And so SOM was one of the few programs that really got what I was saying around, like, no, even if I want to be a banker at Morgan Stanley, I need to understand how my decisions that I make every day impacts the community that we operate in. So that, to me, that's what really stood out as different when I came to campus. And so that was one of the big things it was huge for me.
Yeah, I just want to add to that because I think that's so important. I think Yale gets a reputation of being this sort of social impact school. And what I think the way that plays out in reality for us is that it's not that everyone goes into that space at all. Like Maya was saying earlier, I mean, most people go into traditional business routes. It's a business school. And what the difference is that I think the school attracts people that have a very are very aware of what's happening in society around them. And when you get a class full of students that are conscious of how their decisions impact the business world, but also impact general society, that spurs really interesting conversations in the classroom that leads to more engaged people just in the world around them. And I don't think it's that everyone goes and works at a nonprofit. I really don't think that's true at all. It's just that you're going to get really engaged individuals. And I find that I learned so much from my classmates because of that. But you can still pursue traditional business routes and be successful in that. Or of course you can do something different and do the nonprofit thing. But we're still very much a business school. We still put people out into all these traditional business types of jobs. But I think that just like the type of person that comes to the school might be a little bit more engaged in the other stuff.
Okay, so I think we've heard all these like really great things about Yale, which makes this next question kind of difficult. Is there anything you don't enjoy about Yale or that you wish were different?
I already said mine. I wish we had more Black people. I don't think that, again, that's not unique to SOM. I think most of your top business schools struggle with this, but even though it's not unique to SOM, it's still something I have to experience. So that'll be the one thing that I wish we could change.
This is a hard question, but it's a good one because I think, yeah, I feel like I ask this question all the time when I was going through this process. So I think for me, it's more about how we talk a lot about change and things like that. And something that I wish was maybe like slightly different is how quickly, things kind of change when students keep talking about them. And I'm saying this in a very roundabout way, but so I'm on student government, and there's like a lot of things that I wish could be implemented kind of quicker. And I think we work in this really fast-paced environment. A lot of us come from like corporate jobs, and we get here and we're like, okay, this is wrong. This needs to change now. And I think that like Yale's a little bit more kind of like, I think, entrenched in some of like the more traditional aspects or that kind of thing. Not for most things, but just like a couple things that I think would need to be changed. So like, I kind of wish things were faster, I guess, if that's an answer.
I'll add that one thing I don't think people disclose a lot when you're as two applicants is how challenging the curriculum can be for a lot of people. Not just at Yale, I think that's true of pretty much most. I have friends at other business schools too, and we all kind of commiserate or like, why didn't anyone tell us this was so hard? Like everyone talks about business school, it's so fun and blah, blah. And it is, it's great. It's an incredible experience and you can totally change your career, but it's also challenging. I mean, especially if you're not coming from, depending on your background. But I think it's just important to realize that, it's a lot early. The classes can be challenging, but I think they're challenging to a lot of people. So that's comforting. But I think it's just like a good thing to know. It's not just all like parties and hanging out all the time. Like it's real work. But you learn a lot too. So that's good.
All right, so unfortunately we are out of time, and hopefully, we've answered a lot of your questions. These are some really great questions that came through. If you have any additional questions, or if you feel like your question didn't get answered, you can definitely follow up with MBA admissions team or CNI. Otherwise, thank you all so much for joining us, and we were so happy to have you and be able to share our experiences with you. So thank you. Have a great day, everyone. Stay safe and healthy.